New Yorkers who are suffering with serious medical conditions whose lives could be made longer and more tolerable by medical use of marijuana under a physician's care. In this state, we allow physicians to prescribe drugs that are extraordinarily potent, extraordinarily dangerous, highly addictive, readily subject to abuse. Our law, fortunately, recognizes that those drugs can have a legitimate medical use, as well as illegitimate uses. What we have done in this bill, and are hoping to do in legislation this year, is create a regulatory system that is based on the law that regulates morphine and codeine and Valium and a lot of other drugs that are far more dangerous than anyone has ever thought marijuana is. Set up a parallel structure, and it has to be parallel because under federal law you can't use the exact same structure. So we've set up a parallel, highly regulated, highly restrictive structure under which patients could use medical marijuana under a physician's care. It is parallel, but in several key respects, it is significantly narrower and more restrictive than the law governing morphine or codeine or Valium or a long list of other controlled substances. It is more restrictive, A, in that it says that medical marijuana can only be prescribed for a serious medical condition, which is defined in the bill as being debilitating, life-threatening, et cetera. There is no such statute restricting the prescribing of morphine or codeine. Secondly, there are limits on the quantity that a patient can have at any one time. Again, there is no such restriction for a long list of much more dangerous drugs. A lot of the people who've been criticizing this bill, I guess are looking at California, which has a radically different law on the books than we are contemplating for New York. The bill we are contemplating for New York is far more restrictive and regulatory than the law that has been enacted in any of the 14 states and the District of Columbia that have enacted medical marijuana legislation. And so this is legislation that follows the model that we have in place for controlled substances and that is really needed for thousands of New Yorkers who are suffering. New Yorkers who are trying to get marijuana for recreational use do not need this legislation. In fact, currently in this state, if you have a small bag of marijuana for your recreational use, you're committing a violation like littering. If you obtain your marijuana through the medical marijuana law and are breaking that law, using it illegally, you would now be guilty of a misdemeanor, much more serious than a violation, and you will have had to not only go to a doctor to get a note, but send that note with your name and address to the state of New York. So you'd be putting yourself in jeopardy of a much more serious criminal penalty, and you would have told the state of New York, hello, here I am, here's where to come and find me. You'd have to be really stupid to do that. And so, again, what we are setting up is a law that would provide a medical benefit to a group of New Yorkers who are in serious medical peril, a law that is more restrictive than the law that we use governing morphine and codeine and Valium, and a law that has really zero potential for abuse. I think it is long overdue for us to enact this legislation.
I think it's important. One of the greatest level of compassion we can show as human beings is to alleviate the acute pains of others. To be caught up in the arrogance of stating that medical marijuana is a drug. Folks, we are not talking about standing on the corner selling a bag of pot. We are talking about people who are in pain. And how do we allow philosophical disagreements to get in the way of those who are merely stating we want our pains alleviated in a very medical and a very professional manner? Regulations permits and ensures that things are done correctly. I am not going to participate in this discussion on talking about should marijuana be legal or illegal. That's for another day. Right now, those who are hurting, we have a responsibility in government, we have a responsibility as human beings to state that if there is technology, medicine, plant, trees, or anything else that can do away with pain, we have an obligation to make sure this law passes in the Senate as well as the Assembly, and the governor must sign it. That's what this is about. I'm not going to have a dialogue of what our drug policy should be. I'm not going to have a dialogue of those who may abuse this medical marijuana legislation. Let the law enforcement agencies deal with that. Our obligations as medical professionals and as legislators is to make sure the people of this state receive all the care that is available to them to alleviate pain as they're going through serious acute ailments. That's what this is about. And these people are not here merely because they want a joint. They're here because they're trying to find relief to pain and endure not only the emotional, not only the physical, but the everyday pain that they're going to. And it's troubling that those who are walking around without a cane, that those who are walking around without a diagnosis of an acute ailment, that those who don't have a family member that's enduring every day living in pain and going through the sickness of chemotherapy, going through the sickness of going through the cancer treating drugs, they are trying to dictate to those who are hurting. When you are hurting, there's only one thing you want. You want the pain to be alleviated. And that's why I support this bill and co-sponsored this bill. I don't want other New Yorkers to be in pain. The highest level of altruism we can show to our fellow human beings is to do everything we can, overturn every rock, every stone, every medicine, to find ways that they could have some comfort and not live in a perpetual state of discomfort. This bill must pass, and it must be signed by the governor into law.